Hello, I'm Michael, and I'll be talking a little bit about the automotive industry since we went on a school trip to the Oxford plant, seen here, which was fascinating. But more to the point, we'll be talking about the market structure, the consequences of that, both the good and the bad, as well as the effects of COVID on the industry. Well, on average, it's an oligopoly. Now, it's not that simple because there's a huge market with lots of different niches within it, but it generally is. Now, why is that? Well, it's caused, for one, by high barriers to entry, both for free market reasons, like high infrastructure cost and high manufacturer cost. There's a high minimum efficient scale, but also more policy-related reasons, like the regulations they need to meet and the licenses they need to get. Secondly, there's a history of high market concentration, where firms have been seized and centralized by the government to fund war efforts. They haven't then been decentralized as much as they were previously centralized, meaning that there's more centralization than there previously was. And also there's the fact that it's a heterogeneous product. Now, I know they're all cars and get you from A to B, but between firms they're wildly different. So in the minds of consumers, they are ultimately a heterogeneous product, not homogeneous, meaning it tends towards oligopoly. Now, what's the effects of this? Well, for one, there's the rigid prices, because the firms are price setters rather than price takers, so they have more rigid pricing. For two, there's higher prices because of game theory. It's not a single instance game, so the firms know that if they undercut the market, while it benefits them in the short term, in the long term it's bad for them and everyone else, so they tend to not do it, although some do. And lower cost of production, because they can exploit this previously mentioned minimum efficient scale. And this would be an example. They can afford to have this factory and it pays off for them, despite the high setup cost. Now, thinking back to Mini, or more accurately their parent company, BMW, since it's hard to find data on Mini, things have been looking too bad. In fact, you can look at the 10 firm market share and see that BMW, shown here as, I can't pronounce that, that's German, is 12%, which is pretty damn good. Now, some of the reasons for that is they have the rising demand in the industry for electric vehicles. There's a huge demand, according to the Financial Times, it's in a bubble even. And BMW have been capitalizing on this demand. So they've been one of the front runners in the European market for selling European cars. They've been outselling Tesla, outselling a bunch, partly because of Mini, which I spoke of earlier, which is one of their models which is all electric and is very popular, specifically in the UK, which is, I guess, no longer in the European market, but you know. And but a lot of the other models are also electric, and they're all selling like hotcakes. Now, they've also had trade deals, meaning that they have their supply lines with China have been set back up, meaning they're getting their components for cheap again. But they've also made deals for their batteries, getting them for cheap and reliably, more importantly, in this COVID economy, meaning that they've been a fall in AC and a fall in MC because their average costs have fallen because of these cheaper cost of productions of making the cars. It's gone down. You compound that with the increase in demand, and you have a rise in AR and a rise in MR. So they're doing pretty good for themselves. To show you what I mean visually, here's an oligopoly diagram. You can see this high price inelasticity since it's an oligopoly, and the possible price levels are at P profit, which is the profit maximizing level, and P sales, which is the sales maximizing level. Which specific one a firm goes for is down due to their own pricing strategy. It's hard to decide that. So the factors that would change this diagram, that have changed this diagram, is the rising demand for electric vehicles, which BMW have been heavily capitalizing on, and they've been the front runners of meeting said demand, which would increase their revenue, and the trade deals they've secured with Chinese manufacturers and battery manufacturers to get their components cheaper, meaning that their costs would decrease. And both of these two factors combined would mean that MC and AC would shift to MC2 and AC2. While MR and AR equals D shift to MR2 and AR2 equals D2, putting the new price and quantity levels at P2 and Q2, which you can see in this one. So comparing the difference in the diagrams, you can see that the MR and AR have shifted outwards because of the increase in revenue, and the MC and AC have shifted rightwards, likewise because of the decrease in costs and cost of production. Now, what that means for the profit and the quantity levels is that the prices have decreased, but the profits have increased because the quantity has increased larger than the decrease in profits. So the area under the graph has increased, so that they've changed their strategy and they're selling more, they're getting more profits. That's the expected behavior. So what are the effects that COVID has had on the industry? Well, most of them have been felt on an international sense. Namely, there's been the breakdown of supply chains, as in it, because it's a very globalized supply chain. It's not usually produced in the same country, the components and the car parts, and then the cars shipped somewhere else. There's a lot of shipping going on, and COVID has very much disrupted that. And as a consequence of that disruption, there's been rising supply costs, because they can't get the components. The cost of the components they can get rises. That leads to the rise of the cost of production. It's also led to a limited supply available, because they physically cannot get the supply. No matter how much you're willing to pay, they can't get it to you because of new international legislation as a result of COVID. And this is because of the inelastic supply. It's not their choice. They have been blocked off legally and physically. So those have been some pretty damning consequences. It's for the moment killed the market, but the supply chains have been re-established, or are getting re-established. So it looks like it's on the up and up, because it's been relaxed around China, and China's the main producer. Alright, so to wrap things up, the main takeaways are that it's an oligopoly, and the consequences of that previously spoken of. BMW and parts of the industry are doing quite well. If they can capitalize on the electric vehicles trend, it tends to be going quite well. And while it has massively disrupted the market, the disruption is kind of lessening now. It's getting better. Yeah, hope you found the video interesting. Hope you learned a couple of things. Hope you had a good time. This has been my video.